If you don't have a real sense of what you've done before and what has worked and what has not worked, innovation becomes tricky and it becomes a lot riskier.
Hello, welcome to The Perch, where we highlight authentic voices, expert insights, and meaningful conversation. The Perch brings the Kinkaid School's mission to life through stories of education, leadership, and community. Let's get started. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Mike Maury, and today we'll dial back the clock to look at over 100 years of tradition here at the Kinkaid School. Today, we're delighted to welcome Mr. John Revelle to the Perch studio.
Hello.
Hi, John. Thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here.
John is the archivist at the Kinkaid School, as well as one of our upper school librarians. So, John, let's dive in. Over 100 years to cover in this podcast, so
No
I
pressure.
hope you're ready.
Yeah, no pressure.
Excellent. So, John, let's start with a high-level overview of your role or your roles at Kinkaid,
Okay.
and maybe help the audience understand what part an archivist plays in both preserving and maintaining all the stories and traditions that were established at the Kinkaid School over the past 100 plus years.
Certainly. So the Kinkaid School turns 120 this year or more, depending on who you ask. The archivist's role here at Kinkaid is really twofold. When our former head of school, Don North, came back from an NAIS conference in 2004, 2005, we were just on the cusp of our centennial. And he tasked our director of library services at the time to develop an archive. Kinkaid has always been extremely blessed in protecting our history. Our first archivist was an untrained person who was an alum by the name of Charlie Sanders. Many of your listeners who are alums will know him. He was a graduate of class of 1954. And of course, Francita Stewart Kolsch Ulmer and Susan Hillebrand San Angelo, who are both also alumna, literally wrote books about the history of Kinkaid. But as we were approaching our centennial, Don North had basically found out from schools that were operating in the Northeast about the idea of independent school archives. And he wanted a professional archive at Kinkaid with a missional goal of not only being the center of institutional memory for the school, but also to be a learning tool.
Tell us a little bit about how the archives at the Kinkaid School are used with our students as an educational tool.
For sure. Historical research is a big part of our education here at Kinkaid. So there are primary sources in the archives, basically the receipts of history that speak to a lot of things that kids study in their classes, from objects that relate to World War II primarily, to Vietnam, to other aspects and other time periods in United States history. There's evidence in the archives of how students thought about those things and processed those things. And so those primary sources can be excellent tools in historical research. On top of that, the archives is a source of memory for our journalism students. I often partner, myself and the archives director, Lakeisha Brantz, partner with classroom teachers to bring sources into the classroom. A good example would be at the beginning of every school year, we work with middle school English classes. Adam Holt and Donna Reed do an amazing design project after reading the book Because of Mr. Terrupt. The students are tasked to design an ideal classroom at Kinkaid. And one of the design steps they have to take is to study how classrooms were designed at Kinkaid in the past, literally looking to the past to sort of design the future.
Well said. So what types of things? What types of media are in the Kinkaid School archives? Maybe
Sure.
some things we would know, like photos, but what else is in the archives?
We have photographs, we have statues, we have scrapbooks galore, we have documents, obviously reflecting the school's history going back, beyond even our foundation. Some of the earliest items that we have in the collection relate to Mrs. Kinkaid and her family. The earliest items in the collection date from approximately 1850.
So we have items older than the school itself.
Correct. Yes. Quite a bit older, actually. If it's related to the school in any way, it likely has some kind of representation in the archives. And that's the other half of my position, right? So I am tasked with helping kids to learn and to understand through primary sources, both utilizing the archive as well as utilizing the other tools that we have in the library. But I'm also tasked with maintaining the school's institutional memory, right? Helping us to be able to know who we were so that we can understand where we are and where we're planning on going. So what does institutional memory look like in terms of a school like Kinkaid? Well, it's having documents that can back up and show paths of decision-making for our board, for our various different stakeholders going back quite a long way. And oftentimes, those kinds of the receipts can help us to avoid pitfalls that we encountered in the past and can help us also innovate, right? If you don't have a real sense of what you've done before and what has worked and what has not worked, innovation becomes tricky and it becomes a lot riskier. Institutions that don't have strong institutional memories often make the same mistakes over and over again. Kinkaid is very lucky in that we not only have a professional archive, but we've had a grounded record that goes all the way back to Charlie Sanders of what we've done, going back all the way to the 19 teens, some of the earliest foundational days of the school. And so stakeholders, so alumni, parents, teachers, and administrators all can make informed decisions.
If I can ask,
Yeah.
So that's a pretty big inbox.
Yep.
And year after year, that inbox keeps getting filled.
Sure does.
So do I assume correctly that there has to be an outbox somewhere? And if so, could you tell us a little bit how we make those decisions?
Archives collections are living collections, right? The difference between a collection of papers or in the library sense, a collection of books, is that they're breathing, they're living. Things go in, things go out, right? With the Kinkaid School, we're a smaller archive. So our ability to hold things is limited, but also our ability to turn things away is limited. Some of the items that we collect are irreplaceable, for lack of a better term. But there are times when we have to make decisions. Usually, is this a duplicate? There's only so many pictures of the same event, for instance, that we can hold on to, right? So these things are living and breathing. And another question we have to ask ourselves is, does this tell us something new and novel about ourselves that we don't already have reflected in the collection? Oftentimes, collections come to us in really crazy ways. People, I don't know if you know this, but people in the outside world aren't archivists. And so their own organizational systems are deeply idiosyncratic and personal to them, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes I get a wonderfully organized folder or box full of treasures that someone has taken the time to describe. And sometimes I get a UPS box or a garbage bag that someone has dropped off with a department here with my name written on it. And I'm told to deal with that. And one of the interesting parts of my job, and
I will not complain about having too much email ever again.
Right.
My inbox looks nothing. I don't have a garbage bag in my email, but I might tomorrow.
But there are times where I've had to ask people, please help me fill in the blanks. Where did this come from? And one of the most interesting parts of my job, right, is to either the collections that are already organized and turned in a good state, helping those collections be known in our community, accessible, and the ones that come in a complete pile of objects, it's kind of like walking into a room filled with voices all saying something different at the same time. And part of my job and part of Lakeisha's job is to bring order to that so that that cacophonous noise turns into, hello, my name was Jane Doe. I graduated in the class of 1967. I was a cheerleader. I played trombone, whatever. That's just a made up example, but helping past alumni speak, right? The truth of the matter is the items that we have in the archives are evidence of people and their lives here. And I take it as a big responsibility and a duty to make sure that those items are cared for, right? Because everyone who attends Kinkaid, works at Kinkaid, sends their kids to Kinkaid or their grandkids to Kinkaid, they all leave a mark. And those marks continue long past even my time here. And it's a huge responsibility and a duty. Mm-hmm.
It is beautifully said.
Thank you.
And I think we get a good idea of how much care goes into the work you do here. It's not just...
I always say that while the kids are here, they're more the teacher's responsibility. But when they leave and they graduate and they go on to all of these fantastic next steps in their life, what's left of them here becomes my responsibility. And I take that very seriously.
Let me ask you, if I can, so there have been several traditions at Kinkaid. Some of them continue. Have there been some that have fallen out of the archives? If so, can you give us maybe an example?
Not fallen out of the archives, but definitely fallen out of use at Kinkaid.
Okay.
So much like archives and libraries, institutions in general are living creatures, right? And sometimes as we evolve as institutions, things stop meeting our mission statements. Things stop meeting our goals, right? And institutions make the decision, sometimes painfully, to sunset those traditions. What I would say is, even when those traditions are sunset, they still are a reflection of our history. And so those things can still be found in the archives. A good example, for instance, back in the 60s and 70s, one of the events at Field Day was this enormous inflated ball that they would push across a field, which had to be incredibly heavy and probably an enormous liability for the school, right?
Right.
We don't do that anymore at Field Day for obvious reasons. But that tradition is not disappeared. It's still woven into the fabric of Kinkaid and who we are, right? There are others that just simply do not match our core values anymore. Society has moved on. We as a school have changed, such as freshman initiation. It's not something that we do anymore. However, those people for whom that is an incredibly powerful memory, it's still represented in our archive. We have a student journalism collection that goes back to 1926. So over about 100 years, if not more, actually. And some of the things that you see in there are not active at Kinkaid anymore. But again, they live in the archives. And you can come and read about them or see them anytime you want.
You're a great podcast guest because you have just connected to our final segment I was hoping to get to, and that is when we were talking before, you had mentioned some examples where the archives really played a role in serving our community.
Sure.
And a few of those stories were just fantastic. Would you mind sharing one?
Sure, absolutely. I think one of my most memorable times where I really felt the archives was in service to our greater community was very early in my time here. There was a family who had lost a lot of their photographs in Hurricane Harvey, which had just happened about a year before I started at Kinkaid. And the son who was a graduate of Kinkaid was about to get married. And one of the big things that everyone does at the wedding reception is showing baby pictures, showing pictures of the two people getting married as kids, right?
Okay.
And the family in question lost a lot of those photos. A former member of our faculty who was still deeply connected to the family came to the archive with the amazing idea. She said, I know that you have pictures in here. I know you do. She and her daughter actually both came, and we went through the collection and we pulled photos of him and scanned them for the family, and they were deeply touched. But that's just one aspect of the way that the archives acts as a sort of, also as a sort of a place of alumni memory as well. Like I said before, it doesn't matter how little time you spent here, how little time someone may have taught here, even if you didn't graduate from here, there's a mark. It might take some digging, it might take some excavation, but I can usually find something, and that's in great part thanks to the collecting behaviors of our first archivist, Mr. Sanders. It's in a great part thanks to the work that Francita Stewart Kolsch-Almer from the class of 49 did with compiling the first history book for Kinkaid, and that Susan Hillebrand Santangelo from the class of 1955 did in writing Kinkaid in Houston 75 Years. These tools all are at the disposal of alumni, and I'm here to help make those connections and also to help all of our departments. There's not a place on campus that the archives hasn't touched in some way, whether it's been hunting down ancestors for admissions purposes, looking at past capital campaigns as people were planning for the all-in campaign that we've had recently, working with y'all in strategic communications to find photographs, to write articles about history. And then all three divisions, I've gone in and either done a class or given a talk. And so in that sense, Kinkaid, the archives at Kinkaid are deeply tied to a lot of things. We may not be in the foreground, but I would like to think that the information and the institutional memory that we provide act as a strong support for everyone here.
Why don't you take us out with your thoughts on the role the archives do play in the future of Kinkaid and maybe what you see going forward?
Sure. Well, I mean, Kinkaid is an incredibly robust and resilient institution, right? Margaret Kinkaid started this school at the same time as a lot of other educators, right? One by one, they all fell by the wayside, right? Mrs. Kinkaid's school lasted. One has to look at why that is, right? And I would posit that Mrs. Kinkaid had a singular vision for her school, and her level of what she understood about children and their development. Her education was at a place called the Klopper Institute, and her early, she was educated in the early whispers of child psychology. And so she understood that rote learning was not going to be something that worked, right? And so she was at the forefront at the time of innovation of education for students. And the parents recognized that and they wanted that for their students, right? And Kinkaid has continued to evolve and to innovate over the years. We've experimented with a lot of things. I would posit that one of the reasons why we are such strong innovators is we know where we've been. And so we can form a clear vision of where we need to go. And where we've been, both our successes and our failures, lives in the archives. Did that go well?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
So, John, that is a powerful reflection, I think, on over 100 years of tradition for sure. But how important it is, as you described it, to look into Kinkaid's past to make decisions about the future. I think our listeners are going to really connect with that. And I think your inbox might get full.
That's fine.
Excellent. John, thanks for joining us today on The Perch. It was a pleasure.
You're welcome.
So that is a wrap for today, folks. The Perch will return again in 2 weeks with new conversations and stories about education, leadership, and community. Finally, check out Kinkaid's website and read the Falcon Flyer for more information on how Kinkaid supports our students and our community throughout the year. Thanks again for joining us on The Perch.